Good morning, everybody. My name is Derek. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Derek.
Welcome to the workshop today. This is going to be an amazing workshop, and I'd like to congratulate you guys all for being in the 5% Club, for being the people that really want to do what it takes to stay sober and maintain sobriety. There's so much more than just putting down the bottle, right? Today we have the pleasure of having Andy and Mike, who are, in fact, a sponsor-sponsee team, who are going to teach us about emotional sobriety, which I think is a hugely important topic no matter where you are in your sobriety. They're going to teach us why life becomes like a roller coaster and you're suddenly angry and emotional and life goes up and down and you're crying at moments and wanting to stab people, others, and not actually, hopefully. But
I've never had that problem.
You've never wanted to stab anyone? You haven't been programmed long enough.
He's never cried.
Don't worry. So Andy's got 41 years of sobriety, and Mike has 26. So between the two of them, I feel like they have a few things that they can teach us of value. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to these fellas.
Thanks. Well, good morning to all the fellow AA geeks who have no social life. My name is Andy, and I am an alcoholic.
I'm Mike, and I am an alcoholic.
And just a brief comment on anonymity. If you ever need me, my last name is Crooks.
My last name is Cullen.
So, there we go. Within the rooms. A couple of business items. First of all, on the program and in the website, they used my name and they left Mike's off.
Again.
Mike is, of course, my favorite sponsee. He has no ego issues at all, but I'd like to start off with a round of applause for Mike.
I would just like to say, as long as I've been Andy's sponsee, he has not had a need for a drink or a mind-altering drug.
I owe it all to Mike. So a lot of talk about the Gratitude Globe and having to put in $1 for every year. We're starting a subscription. I see Jim here is in the room. He's older. He can't afford $65. So any contributions towards Jim's contribution to the Gratitude Globe will be gratefully accepted. Let's just a bit of process this morning. We have a brief presentation. We're going to leave time, we hope, for a lot of Q&A and conversation with you all. During the presentation, we'll refer to some materials that we will be handing out immediately after the presentation, but before the Q&A. The materials are a letter, excerpt from a letter between Bill Wilson and Ed Dowling, Bill Wilson's spiritual sponsor. It'll be a copy of a 1958 article in the Grapevine, which is Bill's emotional sobriety letter, which is, from my perspective, worth reading constantly. This is our third workshop, and on our last workshop, we worked on long-term sobriety. And you remember the 20 questions that your sponsor had you do when you first came in? If you answered 3, you were an alcoholic. So we evolved out of that second workshop 20.2. So these are the 20 questions you should be asking yourself after a few years in the program about how lively your program is. So we'll be touching on that. And then also we'll be handing out some website information. All of the materials that we hand out will be available on a website that we're going to give you the pointers towards. So presentation, then a handout, and then a Q&A. So let's dive right into it. Emotional sobriety is the topic, and away we go.
As Andy said, emotional sobriety is the topic. I need more than you. The first known time we heard the phrase is in a 1958 Grapevine article by Bill Wilson. And that's the first I think any of us know of it. And he used it when he called Love the Next Frontier Emotional Sobriety. And in the letter, Bill says, and I'm paraphrasing, that we can work out emotional sobriety problems of dependence that we have upon other things. The exact quote is from Bill Wilson from that letter to the Grapevine. Thus, I think it can work out with emotional sobriety. if we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we will find at the root of it some unhealthy dependency and its consequent unhealthy demand. Let us, with God's help, continually surrender these hobbling demands.
Yeah. So in the canon of Bill's work, it's surprising that this phrase, emotional sobriety, does not strongly emerge till 1958. It's touched on in 51. There's some suggestions on it throughout. But then in 58, he comes out with this earth-shaking, for AA, earth-shaking article on Love, the Next Frontier, emotional sobriety. I'd like to just frame where that article is. In 1951, Bill is in his senior teens of sobriety, 14 years. He is dealing with a lot of issues. There are fights within Alcoholics Anonymous, major fights, disputes. He's trying to he's rammed the traditions through, or he's working on ramming the traditions through. People are pushing against him. There are famous stories where he's invited to talk to AA groups on the condition that he not talk about the traditions. A lot of people didn't like where he was going with that. He had serious conflicts in AA. He had desperate financial problems. And he was suffering from major waves of depression, serious depression. Ruth Hawk, his personal secretary, describes some of the days during those periods where he would sit in his office in New York, sit by himself, smoking and leaving cigarettes lying on the desk to burn out, and he would every once in a while just start crying. This was serious, very serious and difficult time for him. AA was working for him and others. They were all staying sober. He was sober. But he was discontented. He wanted something more, and of course, not just something more in life. He was dealing with these depression issues at a serious level. He'd also figured out by that time, working with guys like Father Dowling and Father Fow in St. Louis and other major spiritual leaders that he was now working with, Emmett Fox, the solution was a spiritual solution. That's where he was going to find it. So that's the context of where this phrase comes. So 1951 through to 58, and then he has this breakthrough insight, which he publishes in the Grapevine.
Yeah, and you know, somebody said to me yesterday, it seems to be a buzzword, and it's not a buzzword. Emotional sobriety is a real topic. It's a real issue, and everybody who has a home group is visible. They can see it in their own home group. There's people that are suffering. So since Bill Wilson wrote that, there's been many Grapevine articles, and if you Google emotional sobriety on your phone right now, you'll probably see 12 or 15 books. I don't even know how many have been written on the topic now. So the growing awareness of this needs to happen within us as we watch people mature in our program. This isn't newcomers. This is people with years in the program that come off the rails, and some experience a crisis in their life. I heard a speaker yesterday talk about some crisis in his life, which moved me. And some people use this experience to restart or re-kick or renew their spiritual growth. And others take it all the way back to drinking. And we need to be aware of those people. We need to be watching for those people. We need to be with those people all the time because they're us. And some people just stop growing in the program. They just quit. I'm a perfect example of one who did it. They become restless, bored, dissatisfied with what Alcoholics Anonymous and the fellowship is doing for them, and they start asking questions. What is AA doing for me today? What good is AA in my life? I'm sober, I've got my family, I've got a good job. What's the point anymore of doing this? And they drift away.
Yeah, so many of us, when we come in, it's quite clear in the early years, sobriety is the first priority. Our program is job one. Staying sober is job one. Come back a few years later, we're doing better financially. Our marriage is finally under control. At least our wives appear to be under control from time to time.
This is being taped, Andy.
Yeah, oh, sorry. Thank you, Andy. That was Mike talking. And suddenly the program is not the priority that it used to be. And some of us, many of us, well, I dare say all of us, required a crisis to come into AA. How many had a crisis? Okay, there we go. That's it's clear majority. We don't have to always wait for a crisis for spiritual growth. Those of us who have been around and seen a lot of guys and gals coming through understand the value of the crisis and understand the value of the expression, the gift of desperation. When I came in, I had the gift of desperation. I've had the gift of desperation in sobriety as well. And that caused me to take spiritual steps, to start again, implement and work through this program steps, to have another spiritual awakening. Well, Bill and Ed were talking about this very subject. When Bill was writing the 12 by 12, Ed and Bill used to correspond a lot. Ed lives in St. Louis and Bill in New York, and they wrote back and forth constantly. One letter that I stumbled on, which was really neat, it must have been about the time they were writing Bill was writing the 12 by 12, and they would send copies around to be reviewed. And I'll read a couple of sentences from Bill's letter to Ed. These steps, and he's talking about, I'm writing about 6 and 7 right now. These steps separate the men from the boys all right. You'll remember that opening line in the 12 by 12. These steps separate the men from the boys all right. But if a man is to be defined as one who is perfectly and continuously willing to grow spiritually, then the number of them must be quite small. And this is what just rocked me. I am inclined to define the man as the one who has arrived at the point where he can try to be willing to grow spiritually in all respects without being whiplashed into it by dire necessity. The men or women separated from the girls and boys are those who are willing to grow spiritually in all respects without being whiplashed into it by dire necessity. We've done it enough now that we understand there's just value in growing spiritually. We see the benefits and we're prepared to take the steps without being whiplashed by dire necessity. Those are the grown-ups. It was a huge insight for me. I thought, wow, what a powerful frame of reference for my program. I don't have to wait for a crisis. I can actually apply these steps in calm and grow spiritually.
If you find yourself, or you know people that are here, there's no explanations or theories required about how you got here. None. You know, Andy talked about the fear of desperation, and we need to regain that when we find ourselves there, or you find your friend there and you need to talk to your friend. And it's back to the basics. You know, what's the next indicated action? Like a newcomer who goes to a meeting, the next indicated action is call your sponsor and get going on this. Tell your sponsor exactly how you feel and exactly what's going on, and stop it. Get back to the meetings and get back to your big book and get back to the basics of what got you here. The worst problem I ever had in my life was my alcoholism and everything that it caused. And yet, when other problems arise, I don't now run from it, but I have in the past not sought these 12 steps to help me. But these will get you through anything. And I live that by experience, and so does my sponsor, Andy.
So we preach action in these rooms constantly. You know, we joke about the chapter is into action, not into thought. And there's great truth in that. We tell sponsees, a couple of speakers referred to it. Some of us have said this to sponsees ourselves. Get down on your knees and pray. Well, the answer is, well, I can't pray. I don't believe in God. That's not what I told you to do. I did not tell you to believe in God. I told you to get on your knees and pray. And I've had sponsees. You know, we've all seen the magic work. We've all experienced the magic in our lives. Whether I believe it or not, I get on my knees in the morning, and 3 days later, my days are running smoother. Who knows why? I don't care. The results are there. When I first came into AA, I realized this is the most pragmatic, ruthlessly pragmatic theology I have ever encountered in my life. If it works, we do it. and we keep on doing it until it doesn't work, and the instant it stops working, we find something else to do. But the key is actions. What are the actions to take to achieve, well, first of all, to deal with crises if they do come, and when you find yourself drifting into this lassitude or distance from the program, when you're not paying attention, how can you execute the actions required to stimulate spiritual growth? Well, in the Grapevine article in 1958, Bill Wilson writes, if we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we'll find at the root of it some unhealthy dependency and its consequent unhealthy demand. Let us, with God's help, continually surrender these hobbling demands. Then we can be set free to live and love. We then, and this is where the action comes in, we may then be able to 12th step ourselves and others into emotional sobriety. We may be able to 12th step ourselves and others into emotional sobriety. Therein lies the key.
So if we unpack this and that statement before, we look at the keys. The key, we can be set free to live and to love. We may be able to 12-step ourselves. I love that, 12-step ourselves, taking care. 12-step ourselves and others into emotional sobrieties.
So we're going to be set free. That's what Bill talks about. Set free to live and love. As he frames it, our natural state is by this time to live and love. We need to be set free again. At least that's my experience. In many ways, we are back to the bondage of self. We sober up, program's important, we start to lose the bondage of self, but we reacquire it. And we need to be again set free of the final chains of bondage of self. And we do this by action, by loving, one of our three legacies, service, love, and unity, but by action.
The actions, 12-stepping ourselves and others in all aspects of our life. This is the action of the program, the 12 steps. We're applying at a postgraduate level, and I say that in the sense that I'm just going to speak for me personally. Real quick, year 9, met my second wife, having a heyday, quit going to meetings, moved to the southeast, didn't like the people because they didn't know who I was. And what really shocked me was some people said, "Are you a newcomer?" Now that tells you where I was at with my sobriety. So that pissed me off, and I stayed away. So when I say applied at the postgraduate level, I'm no longer a newcomer. I've done a couple of step 4s, I've done a couple of step 5s, I know this program works, I know how it works, but for some reason I'm not working it. And it took a good friend to come and get me and say, we need to get back to work, we need to get back to the basics, we need to get back to the fear and desperation you had when you came in here, because you're more suicidal today than you were when I met you.
And the story is instructive from Mike's perspective. It's more instructive from the fellow who approached him. Someone reached out to him and say, you need some help. You need to get engaged. Of an alcoholic approaching another suffering alcoholic. Now he's sober, but he's still an alcoholic, saying you need some help. And that's what I have found about the truth about this statement, is to 12-step within the program, taking the message to other alcoholics who are suffering, demonstrating love for them, not in some theoretical manner, but demonstrating in a very practical manner, seeking out newcomers at meetings. I enjoyed the speakers who through the weekend have talked, I think it was Bob D, talked about, you go where the fish are. You put your hook in the water where the fish are. You rob banks because that's where the money is. Well, you go to AA meetings because that's where suffering alcoholics are. And that's where the newcomers are. When I came into the program years ago, my first true AA meeting, what was the fellow who was then to be my sponsor? I didn't seek him out. He came up to me in the coffee line, big speakers meeting, line up for coffee and cake after, and he grabbed me, grabbed me. He said, "You're a newcomer," and I said, "Yeah." I don't know how he discerned that, but and he said, "Good to meet you." And he gave me his name, and we chatted for a bit. And you know, he said then, he was a psychological genius. He said, "We've talked it over, and I've been assigned as your temporary sponsor." Now, of course, in my quick alcoholic mind, I thought, boy, they've even had a meeting about me already. These people clearly understand what I am and how important I am. And of course, I was new enough to the program that I didn't know I had any choice. I thought, well, okay, that's the standard operating procedure. You're my sponsor. Okay, great. And we got to work. I've had that same conversation again and again. The other thing he did was he gave me his phone number. We all do that. We put our names on the newcomer package. He took my phone number, and he taught me how to use the phone. He phoned me. "Andy, Doug here." "Hi, Doug. How you doing?" "Good." "Yeah, just checking in." Click. Until that time, I didn't know how to do that. You know, but he showed me the script. And I have done that to good advantage. And that's with the newcomers. Old timers, different formula. We'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah, we've got the, you know, we've got I loved Heather's talk yesterday, her workshop on responsibility in Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah.
We have a huge responsibility. We have an immense response. When you join a home group, that's the heartbeat of AA is the book, and is the home group, and we have a huge responsibility. And you see those people in your group. You know, you want to go and just sit down Saturday morning and grab your coffee, or Thursday night and grab your coffee and just have your meeting because you've had a busy day at work. But there's that guy that's been coming for 25 years, and his head's been down for a week. We need to get up. We need to go over, and we need to ask these middle AAs, what's going on? How are you doing? Or you've got a group list, and you know, you see Al hasn't been to a meeting in 3 months. And he's in double digits. And where is he? Pick the phone up. Phone Al. See where he's at. See if he'd like a ride to a meeting. See if he'd like to go for a coffee before the meeting. Maybe he's dying to talk to somebody, but he's forgotten how to reach out. That fear and desperation has sort of disappeared. He's forgotten how to reach out. But we haven't forgotten how to reach out, and we need to take advantage of that. And we need to reach out to old-timers, middle-timers, and newcomers all the time. That's our responsibility. And thank you, Heather, for that talk yesterday.
Yeah, in the last decade or so, a lot of my sponsee relationships have started with a conversation that would go like a bit like this. "Hi, my name's Andy. I've not met you before." And, "Well, my name's Dave." "How you doing, Dave?" "Oh, okay." "Dave, what step are you working on?" One of my favorite questions. "What step are you working on?" "Well, I've been in the program for 20 years. Yeah, okay, good. What step are you working on?" "I did the steps a long time ago." "Oh, so you're not working on any step." And he said, "Well, I guess you could put it that way." And I said, "Yeah, I guess you could. And there'd be some truth in that. So if you're not working on any step, you're really at step one." And so the conversation starts. And that has been a joyful conversation so many times, where guys that I meet who have long-term sobriety, like lots of years, I draw a distinction between a long-timer and an old-timer. So I've run into a lot of long-timers, and now we're working on becoming old-timers. Long-timers have years. Old-timers have wisdom. And therein lies the distinction. And that was the hard lessons that I had to learn. I didn't learn this easily. There were some very important moments of desperation that I was handed. Thank you, God. And they taught me and brought me forward in my program. But now, I'm not saying making claim to adulthood, but I'm at least peeking over the fence and saying, okay, that's what the far country looks like, where I can take actions and steps and spiritually grow. But back to the main point, it's these actions of scanning the rooms, looking for people who might have issues, and being ready, willing, and able to help them. We start going to meetings to find people to work with. We don't go to meetings to find out what we can get out of the meeting. We go to the meeting to find out what we can give, and give of ourselves, not just a share for a couple of minutes. That's easy. This is true love. This is AA life. This is where we give of our time and our coin, and we help people wherever they are in their growth. We begin to practice the program principles in all our affairs, including meetings and at work. Again, hats off to Heather for the genius of applying the elements of long-term sobriety and the rules of good sobriety to all elements of our work. We start looking out for people at work who might be in trouble, people who might need help. We begin to approach work with humility and service. Wow, what a formula that was for my success. To Bob's point last night, counterintuitively, these things can lead to enormous financial success. So serving people humbly and with love and compassion. And I was a lawyer. Jeez. But back into the actions that we can take.
He's a lawyer. I just go back up a little bit to the sponsees. I know that we're talking about long-term sobriety or middle term and watching out emotional sobriety, the lack of emotional sobriety that we're looking for, or maybe finding it ourselves. But we need to start teaching our sponsees right away that they need to be watching out. And they hang out. They come in groups, right? They form their little cliques. They go to Boston Pizza, smoke cigarette. Well, I can't smoke anymore, but I used to smoke till 3 a.m, drinking coffee and hanging out with that group I sobered up with. And they need to watch out for each other. And they need to learn there. And we need to tell them that they need to learn there. It's not just about you anymore right now. So we need to get that across. And that's my responsibility to tell my sponsees. And Andy, as brutal as he is on asking what step I'm on all the time, and Alok, I know it just never ends, does it? So I was recently in the hospital. One of my sponsees said, I have quite a few. I'm lucky. They all were coming up, and one of them said, well, what's going to change going forward? And I said, as soon as I'm healthy, you better know what step you're on every day. And that's compliments of just because I like to pay it back.
Well, it's another round of applause for Mike.
And thanks. And Andy is still sober. So, did you want to say something funny?
No, go ahead.
Cracks me up that you're funnier than... I'm in sales, Andy's a lawyer, and he's the funny one.
I'm a good lawyer.
So, when we talk about the principles about what keeps us on track and what do we lose on track, and not almost always, it is always. Every time I have somebody go off the rails, I can look at them and say, you've stopped meditating and you've stopped praying. And if they're telling me the truth, they'll say, yeah, I have. I haven't prayed for a couple of weeks, I haven't prayed for a month, I haven't. And today, I'm not a very quick learner, and Andy will attest to that. And so in 19 years of sobriety, I meditated about 19 times on a yearly retreat, and they made us do that. But I now meditate 2 times a day, and when I was sick here and before I went to the hospital, I was meditating 3 and 4 times a day, getting my vehicle ready for the surgeons. So meditation, I can't even imagine walking out the door of my house anymore without meditating, because it just has calmed me, and I'm not a very calm person, and it removes the roadblocks and opens up the life and opens up my heart. And I just can't imagine. So the first thing I say to them is that, and it's the meditation, and these are the keys to long-term sobriety and long-term emotional sobriety. And prayer. Prayer is so important. And as Andy said, you don't have to pray to God. And what is the nature of my prayer? And this I have learned from Andy. So I'm 19 years sober before I learned how to pray properly. And I'm going to share this. Because I used to say, God, help me have a good day. God, make everything safe for me today. God, make sure I don't get caught in rush hour traffic. But it's not that anymore. Now it's God, give me the courage to face whatever comes my way today. God, help me get through whatever's coming my way. I don't know what it is, but I know you're with me. God, whatever happens to my children today, let me be accepting. And that's how my prayer has changed. My prayer hasn't changed to begging for... We're not immune to life. Nobody's immune. We've all been touched by cancer and things like this, and we're not immune from anything. So I just want God to give me the strength to face what's coming, because the old Buddhist saying to the guy who's afraid of dying, you're afraid of dying? Don't fear it. You're going to die. So quit, So I want the strength and the courage to face what comes at me every day, and I've quit asking for ridiculous things, thanks to Andy. So
I joke that being a good sponsor is easy, but you have to have two essential qualities or abilities. The first quality or ability that you must have to be a good sponsor is the ability to look like you're listening. The second quality is being able to choose a number between 1 and 12. So they come and they hit you with their problems, and they go on and on and on. And finally, they run out of steam. And you're nodding and looking like you're listening. And then you have to choose a number between 1 and 12. You say, well, it sounds to me like this could be a step problem. And they just keep quiet. He will leave you, or she, in the case of the woman, will leave you praising you. Thinking, what a genius of a sponsor. There is some element of truth to all of that. But the other standardized approach that I have to sponsorship, I indicated that often new sponsor relationships for me, have started with the question, what step are you working on? If I've got a sponsee who's running into issues, one of my first standard questions is, how's your meditation practice? How's your meditation and prayer practice? Are you doing it daily? When was the last time you did it? And that usually saves a lot of time. Oh, yeah, okay. Because like Mike and like so many of us in the rooms, when I came in, my sponsor got me meditating. And I used to have a kitchen timer. I'd set it for 10 minutes, the worst 10 minutes of my day. Oh, God. And I tried incense. And finally it started to work, and I began to see some value. And it got better and better. But it was never such an important part of my life that it was absolutely essential. So, one day I said, well, I think I'll just sleep in. So I slept in and saved the 10 minutes. And then pretty soon I wasn't doing the prayer either, because that only took a couple of minutes. And I discover again, oh, geez, my life's in the ditch and I'm on the rumble strips. I better get back. So I get back to doing it. And this ratio was always, once I stopped prayer and meditation, it took 14 days to get off into the ditch. And then once I started again, it took 10 days to get back on. So, this cycle in and out. And then one day I don't know why, I just stopped. I went through almost a decade where prayer and meditation was not part of my life. And then I started reading some books, and after a few crises, gifts of desperation, I started to reinstitute the practice. And this time I'm pushing through it. I've got some training, I've got downloaded some courses, and took some instruction in meditation and talked to my sponsor about meditation and prayer. And with those disciplines, it's getting better and better all the time. Now it's not something I have to do, as Mike says, it's something I must do to make my day. And these, as we approach people in the meetings to help them, as Bill says, we can't give what we don't have. And we have to have or acquire these things through the disciplines of the program, like prayer and meditation. And like inventories, continuous personal inventories. And last year we did a workshop on inventories. And not just fourth step moral inventories, but 10th step personal inventories. How are my relationships? What are they doing? We become a bit obsessive about that, and that's okay, because we're writing about this and trying to figure out what the problems are, striving for right relationships all around us. These are the actions of the program. And we don't do this alone. We do this in conversation. We have sponsors and sponsees. And that's actually a mutual relationship. It's just, we have meetings where we're talking and sharing at depth. And we all know the experience of meeting a new alcoholic. And within moments, you're talking about spiritual values. I mean, it's just an amazing phenomenon when I think about it. Years ago, I was at a law event and chatting with another lawyer, and she said, well, if you don't mind, I'm not much for small talk. I said, okay, I've been pushed back before. So I turned to her and I said, so in your life, do you frame the most important thing as rules that govern your life or goals that you aspire to? And she said, what on earth are you talking about? I said, well, you didn't like small talk, so I thought I'd get serious. She got up and walked away. That happened to me a lot. But we do talk at a depth that, quite frankly, the normies don't understand. And we get into it quickly. So it's through prayer, meditation, inventories, and conversations with the people, our fellows in the program. The actions that dissolve the problem, not theories or beliefs.
And only actions are going to dissolve the problems. This is an action program. We talked about how every one of us in here has heard what a simple program Alcoholics Anonymous is. Mm-hmm. Complicated people, simple program. But it's simple all the time, every day. So only the actions are going to dissolve these problems. And we need to get to it, and we need to get to it now. So if you know somebody who needs help, reach out. If you need help, reach out.
But before you reach out, how many have ever sailed or done any boating or yachting? Okay. How many have experienced the fact or the phenomena of throwing an anchor overboard and realizing you didn't tie the damn rope to the boat? Most yachtsmen can quote the price of new anchors pretty quickly. Make sure your rope is tethered to the boat. And you do that with prayer and meditation, inventories, and good connectivity with guys and gals in the program. Take the actions. Dig the hole, make it solid, and then go out and help your fellow alcoholics. That's how I have achieved, and we have achieved emotional sobriety. So we've got about 20 minutes, which is exactly what we targeted for Q&A. Now Mike's going to hand out, with assistance of some of the people in the crowd, we've got about 60 copies. Don't worry, we've got other copies on the website of the materials. I have one typographical error. God, you proof these things so many times. When you get your copy in the letter from Bill Wilson to Ed Dowling, it says, I'm included to define the man. It should be, I'm inclined to define the man.
Some of you may have to share these today, but Andy does have a website, and all of these materials are available on the website. Yeah. It's just Andy's website, like this. Just like this workshop, it's Andy's workshop. So the website is Andy's. But
can we have another round of applause for Mike?
Make a man.
Yeah.
Thank you. I feel like I'm on the emotional sobriety beam right now. Thanks, everybody.
So while you're thinking about just some questions or contributions to the conversation that you might have. We had a lot of fun in the last workshop with these 20.2 questions. These are, if you answer 3, you should do a gut check on your program. Have you recently said to yourself during the closing prayer at an AA meeting, wow, that was a boring meeting? Or you've not had a conversation with another AA in the last week, or you don't have a sponsor. So, any questions? Yeah. We'll repeat the questions for the tape.
The second page supposed to be blank.
Yes.
Yes.
Is the second page supposed to be blank? No. Is the question is the second page blank? Yes. That's a yeah. Like we start off with our new couple.
Just give me a second. See, we shouldn't have let the
Do you guys have any more?
No,
Your website is or your workshop's way too popular, man.
sorry.
Don't stop.
Okay.
I'm gonna go get ready for the meeting, so I'm not actually going to you guys out. Thank you so much.
We're left to leave it with that. Ladies and gentlemen, Derek is leaving the room. So questions or contributions? Yeah.
Hi, good morning. I'm Anthony. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Anthony.
Thank you for your presentation, discussion. My question is this. You yourself have had 40 years of sobriety and 40 years of helping other people. The other gentleman to your left, I think you were his sponsor. You've had about 20 years. That's a long relationship. If someone was to ask you, what stages, that's a long period of time, how would you explain or how would you categorize the stages of that relationship?
Okay, so Anthony's question for the tape and for the rest of the room. We got a lot of, first of all, just a correction, I've 41 years and 26 years. We've been working together for about 5. So our personal relationship isn't that long. But the question was relating to, do you see stages in the relationship sponsor-sponsee? I'm going to expand that, stages in sobriety. Any other questions? Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Just to clarify, I'm
Yep.
Gord.
Gord.
So Bill Wilson's saying that he wants me to achieve emotional sobriety by doing sort of an ongoing, extemporaneous micro inventory throughout the day.
Okay.
And then trace that back to some kind of a character defect or.
Okay. So the question there is from Gord is Bill Wilson suggesting that we achieve emotional sobriety by doing inventories, micro inventories daily at least, and working with others basically. Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
In the initial letter, you referred to Ed Dowling as Bill Wilson's spiritual sponsor. Do you think that continues to play a role, or should continue to play a role for people in Alcoholics Anonymous besides, say, an AA sponsor?
Okay. So Alex's question was, Bill had Ed Dowling as a spiritual sponsor. Should that still or could that still apply? Is that a good idea? So let's tackle those 3 questions. Turning to the stages question, which is a good one. My experience in sponsorships is, yes, there are there's stages in the relationship, and there's periods of calm and periods of excitement, and you acquire history. Sometimes in sponsee conversations, I feel like what I am is the tape recorder. I'll say things like, you do remember that you've gone through this before. When? Well, let's go through all the times you've gone through this before. So there is that element to it. You are a living memory. But the relationship, if it's a profitable and useful one, in my experience, does get deeper and more personal.
Yeah, I agree. First, I want to be clear that I've only had 2 sponsors. One was 19 years and then Andy. And I wouldn't have dropped my first one, but he died. So the relationship's been great. It's changed over time. We take some time to feel each other out, see what's going on. First time over to Andy's for a coffee, but today I'm full of love for Andy, his wife, and I trust him you know, if you're open, and I'm open because I want to be really good. I want to be really spiritual. When I leave this planet, I don't want to be any what ifs or what could have beens. And so I'm open with Andy about everything. And the trust is through the roof. I trust Andy with, there isn't anything I wouldn't tell Andy and share with Andy. So it's at 26 years, it's a little different than when I was at 1 year, but it's great.
The other aspect to your question, Anthony, which is good, are there stages in sobriety? And my sobriety's had clear, identifiable stages. My sobriety is different now than it was when I first came in. And it's different now than it was 10 years ago and 20 years ago and so on. Broadly speaking, I frame my sobriety in 4 major epochs, or the first 10 years. I was putting away my old spiritual beliefs and coming to understand that not just understand, to know there is a God. Past faith into knowledge. That was the first 10 years. The second 10 years was an awareness, an understanding that God might be aware of me and might be interested in me. That wasn't good news because it was still an Old Testament God who would slaughter entire nations just for the hell of it. But he was aware of me. The third decade is that I came to sense that he might love me. The fourth decade, I came to understand and see and know the truth that if he loved me, who was I not to love myself? So over my sobriety, I can see large stages and phases. That's one, but there's been many others in all aspects of my life. In my sporting life, my business life, my sex life, my marriage life. They're pretty close. Have all gone through stages. And the other value of a sponsor-sponsee relationship is to understand and mark the milestones of those stages, because you miss them. They go by. Turning to the third question next, Father Ed Dowling. Bill he had a number of spiritual advisors. He consulted deeply with Father Ed Dowling. There was a big cardinal, I've forgotten his name now, and Father Pfaff out of St. Louis as well. He had Emmett Fox and others of Emmett's crowd. So he consulted deeply, but he always referred to Ed as his spiritual coach or sponsor. And he always referred to Ebby as his AA sponsor, which was kind of interesting. For my story, as some of you may know, every year I do an annual 10th step inventory, a full-blown inventory every year. So on my AA birthday anniversary, I start, and I follow that with a 5th step, a confessional conversation. And Father Kevin out at the Mount, we were trying to figure out when we started. We think it's maybe 25, 28 years ago we started this. And November 3rd is my date. I start November 3rd, I start my inventory. It's finished up around Christmas time. I book a 5th step or a conversation with him. And what a rich experience that has been for me. We now meet during the year, but we meet on that anniversary. And we can recall what we talked about last year. How did you do with this defect? What's the progress you've made? Where's your program? Where's your life? So from my experience, I took a page out of Bill's book. I said, to have a spiritual coach might be a good idea. Now, I'm not of the Catholic tradition. I'm a Presbyterian. But I went to Father Kevin. So I found a spiritual coach that has really yielded huge benefits for me. Not just from one conversation. It's the benefits have come from tilling the soil for many, many years. So if my experience is worth anything, yes, having a spiritual coach other than a sponsor, is a really good thing. That's worked very well for me.
I just want to touch on the other side of it. My sponsor is my spiritual sponsor also. I'm very lucky to have Andy, and my first sponsor for the first 19 years, for anybody who remember him, is Morley M. So I've been blessed and graced with great sponsorship. I'm not a religious person. I'm not even sure what a Presbyterian is. That legal? Presbyterian?
Yeah.
So I'm not inclined to find someone else. I share everything and get everything I need from the sponsor I have today. I'm very grateful for that, but I don't have a separate spiritual sponsor.
So coming to the second question, which is I'm really glad Gord asked this. Was Bill suggesting that we achieve emotional sobriety by doing inventories and the minor steps? We framed the presentation as outlining emotional sobriety, and Bill's solution is love and action. The action that we suggest and that we in our experience have found, the action is found in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and working with newcomers. 12-stepping ourselves to emotional sobriety. That is Bill's main point. To achieve emotional sobriety, I must 12-step myself and others to emotional sobriety. Now, 12-step is a complex step. It's by far the most complex step in the 12, in my view. It refers to practicing these steps in all our affairs. So first of all, it's not just the rooms, it's workplaces, it's in the home, it's on the sport field. That was a big challenge for me. I was a very poor athlete. Though I was not a bad athlete, I was a very poor loser. And I was a worse winner. which are obstacles that I had to overcome by practicing these programs in all my affairs, including my sporting life. So we practice these principles in all our affairs, but we're also helping the suffering alcoholic and the suffering people around us. We live our lives in service and love. That, for me, is the cornerstone of what Bill's talking about. Emotional sobriety is achieved through 12-step work, in the largest sense of the word 12-step work. It includes going to work with newcomers and detox and brand new, but includes helping other people in the room. It includes helping everybody around you, in my experience. Our last point was, before you start that, make sure you got something to offer. And from our experience, the only way we've been able to make sure that we have anything to offer is to go through the steps like inventories, prayer, meditation, conversations with fellow alcoholics and spiritual coaches. So working backwards, we do the inventories and we do the details of the steps to achieve something that we can offer. Then we achieve emotional sobriety through service and love, actions and love, by practicing the 12 steps of this program in all our affairs. I think that's the formula that we're trying to achieve.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate your question, Gord. It is an essential part of what I think Bill was talking about to do, from my perspective, inventories, fifth steps, conversations, prayer and meditation. That's absolutely essential. But it's essential so that when I throw the anchor overboard, the rope is tied to the end of the boat, and I don't lose the damn thing. Sorry, bad language. So, any other questions? Yeah, at the back.
Hi, Steve, an alcoholic.
Hi, Steve.
And like in regards to emotional, I feel like the oldest sponsor you've been working with for 10 plus years, who's been an integral part of your sobriety, in situations sponsor might be trying to start to pull away.
How do we deal with sponsors or sponsees that pull away? Yeah, that's the worst sponsorship experience I've ever had. My second sponsor, I had a sponsor in Toronto, Doug, and I moved out to Calgary well within my first year of sobriety. My second sponsor was Frank. And Frank and I worked together for 7 or 8 years. A great sponsor. I was a pain in the eye. Looking back on it, I thought, oh God, he had the patience of Job. But then one day, I went over to his house for coffee, and we had coffee. And at the end of the coffee, he said, by the way, Andy, this is our last conversation. And I said, whatever do you mean? He said, I'm through with you. I want nothing more to do with you. I was gobsmacked. I probably shouldn't have driven home. Now, Frank did himself in about 6 months later. And my wife pointed out, she said, obviously, when that conversation took place, something that you simply didn't understand or didn't see was going on. It took me a long time to pick myself up and dust myself off to re-engage after that. That's dramatic and powerful, but it's no more dramatic and no more powerful than the sponsor who just drifts away. And that has happened so many times in this program, hasn't it? We hear about the guy, I had a great sponsor, but, I haven't talked to him in a long time. There's some obligation, in my view, on the sponsee to reach up, but then also to have clarity around the relationship. I think Bob quoted last night, said, I have a sponsor and he knows that I'm his sponsee. And that's really important because we've all had that experience, haven't we? Where is so-and-so your sponsee? Well, I'm not really sure. I haven't talked to him 3 or 4 years. So to have some clarity about the issue is really important. When that happens, going back to the principle of clarity, I think the sponsee can phone the sponsor and say, listen, it's not working out, I'm going to get another, or you can just get another. I've had multiple sponsorships at times. I have one main sponsor, but again, taking a page out of Bill's book, somebody asked him, who's your sponsor? He said, well, Ebby's my sponsor. But what I do is I look for things when I have needs or issues or problems, spiritual problems I'm dealing with, I look for people in the rooms who have solved them and ask them to help me for a period of time. And I've done that over the years, and that's to great advantage. So I have one core sponsor, but then I'll shop around. I'll see some guy in a meeting, and he may be talking, talking about how he came to terms with the real importance of real things. And I think, whoa, well, that resonates for me. And I just go up and say, can you be my sponsor for a couple of years? I'd like to work through that with you. And he said, geez, I've only got 4 years experience on the program. And I said, well, I don't care. You figured this problem out, and I haven't. So I did that a lot. I worked with a guy for we worked together for 5 years. He was a sponsor. We tried to learn to live without worry and fear. And so he was my fear sponsor. So sponsorships, pay attention to them, be careful with them if they're drifting, and be clear. Is this just drifting? Is it going to drift away, or should we end it and begin another one? That's that's from the sponsee's experience, from sponsor's experience. Sponsor, in my view, cannot fire a sponsee. You can let a sponsee know you think you have a sponsor, but you're not doing anything we're talking about, so you might want to wonder about that. But that's just sort of my comments. Yeah, okay.
So before we wind it up, I just want to say these 20 questions that we had, they were generated from a workshop Andy and I did last September with full participation from the 24 people who attended. So these weren't just Andy and I, but these are 24 people with multiple years sobriety at an emotional sobriety workshop, and we said, let's come up with 20.2. So this isn't just Andy and Mike having a coffee and coming up with some stuff. We do that lots, but this isn't. And also on the right-hand side of the table here, Andy has some cards, and there's a stack of them here. If you didn't get the materials, that has Andy's website on it, just Andy's, and all the material is downloadable from there.
Okay. The website, it says just Andy C, but I do a lot of the work on it. So we're going to bring it to a close. Last night, at the Sobriety Countdown, great numbers from the rally this year, 20% increase in ticket sales. On these Sobriety Countdowns, I'm trying to work my way through. I try to get through one without starting to cry partway through it. 7,042 years. 7,042 years. What an achievement. I look at us, I think of myself and what we were like before we sobered up. 7,042 years of constructive, engaged, living, and loving. Wow. So, on that note, we're going to wind up. Let's rise with the Serenity Prayer.